Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Coming up on the program this week, more high-profile visits to the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky from the United States, and a group of House Democrats meet with him in Kyiv. They give their impressions afterwards, as well as developments out of Ukraine. Plus, South African authorities continue to search for bodies in flood-ravaged KwaZulu-Natal. We speak to the UNDP resident coordinator in the country, Ayodele Odushola, on efforts by international aid organizations in the situation. That's Diplomatic Channel in summary. First, a quick check on other discussions in diplomatic circles. We'll be right back. I'm Amarachi Ubani.
When you have a situation you have in Nigeria, anywhere in the world.
The Speaker of Nigeria's House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, says the country's parliament shares the responsibility to keep Nigerians safe amidst the growing security challenges. Speaking on the sidelines of the 7th Economic Development Forum in London last week, he said Nigerian lawmakers have discussed national security concerns on a regular basis despite the challenges.
I believe Parliament has done everything and is still doing more that it needs to do. I don't know that there's any parliament that has in the world that has debated an issue, flogged an issue like this House has. Every single day of sitting, we talk about this. There are motions and resolutions of the House. The replacement of the service chiefs some time ago was based on the pressure mounted by members of the House on a daily basis. The House at one point asked the President to come in and brief the House so that we could all share and give different perspectives. The House had a security summit some time ago. For 5 days, we collated views from all over, experts, traditional chiefs, international, and we laid out our action plan, legislative action and executive action. We've submitted certain bills to that regard, and there's still some things to be done as of yet. I believe this government has done a lot, but unfortunately, we're fighting an unconventional war. And anywhere in the world, it's perhaps one of the most difficult things to fight. I don't know that even the United States would have been able to deal with this problem just so rapidly and quickly. They have gun violence in America every single day. They still have not been able to deal with it. But that is not to say that there's not a lot yet to be done. Yes, good or bad, the government has to accept responsibility. Citizens don't want to hear any of this, that, oh, this is where we're coming from and this is where we are today. We've done so much. Nobody's hoisting flags anymore in the local government. No, citizens don't want to hear that. They just want to be safe. And that's where I think the government needs to tighten its belt and do a lot more. And that's where we have, I keep saying you can't do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. And that's why from our summit, we advocated the use of contractors, what some other people call mercenaries, and just farm this thing out and let them come in and do the job. There's nothing about national pride, as far as I'm concerned. You just need to get the job done. There's more than one way to skin a cat. If that's going to do it, then let's go for it.
Guinea's military junta says its transition back to civilian rule will probably take more than 3 years, a proposal likely to upset ECOWAS, which has called for a swift return to constitutional order after last year's coup. Head of the junta that took power in September, Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, said that after political consultations, he was considering a transition of 39 months, the first time he's proposed a timeline. He said the National Rally and Development Committee and the government in turn will submit to the National Transitional Council, which serves as parliament, this proposal, which is the result of extensive and patient consultations. Guinea's former president, Alpha Condé, had been detained since last September when Special Forces troops overthrew him on allegations of fostering endemic state corruption. However, Condé was released in late April.
À de larges et patientes concertations.
Finally, China reportedly sent 5 satellites into space with a Long March 11 rocket on Saturday from the farthest launch site in the East China Sea so far. The mission, which is a third sea launch mission performed by China, further expands the maneuvering range of the country's sea launch. Chief designer of Long March 11, Zhang Ming, said the launch site is the farthest from the port so far. The mission will accumulate technologies and experience for sea launch in the future. So far, China has launched 13 missions of Long March 11, all of which succeeded. The mission is the 418th flight of Long March rockets. The 5 satellites carried by the Long March 11 rocket into space will mainly provide commercial remote sensing services for industries such as land sensors, urban planning, and national disaster monitoring. Welcome back. It would be the second high-profile visit by any member of the U.S. government since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, assuring President Volodymyr Zelensky of U.S. support. For House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who led the group of House Democrats on this trip, Ukraine has been on a fight for freedom.
The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky welcomed the U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi on Saturday. He shared a video of her visit after holding talks. He expressed his gratitude for what he called a signal of strong support for Ukraine from the people of the United States, Congress, and two-chamber support and two-party support, which is appreciated by the Ukrainian people as well.
Adam Schiff from California.
You're very welcome.
He said the visit suggests the United States is a leader in the strong support of Ukraine during the war against Russian aggression. Ms. Pelosi thanked the Ukrainian president for the fight for freedom.
We believe that we are visiting you to say thank you for your fight for freedom, that we are on a frontier of freedom, and that your fight is a fight for everyone. And so our commitment is to be there for you until the fight is done.
During the press conference in Poland afterwards, Ms. Pelosi said America stands with Ukraine until victory is won, condemning President Vladimir Putin's diabolic invasion.
I'm very honored to be with a very distinguished congressional delegation that has traveled here to send a clear message to the world. America stands with Ukraine. We stand with Ukraine until victory is won. Do not be bullied by bullies. If they're making threats, you cannot back down. That's my view of it, that we're there for the fight, and you cannot fold to a bully.
She also said the House was in the process of something stronger than the Ukrainian Democracy Lend-Lease Act and looking to giving support to Ukraine in a very strong way, not just for Ukraine, but also for Eastern European countries who are assisting Ukraine.
And the Lend-Lease will not just be for Ukraine, but also for Eastern European countries who are assisting.
Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer said on Sunday he will add provisions to the $33 billion Ukraine aid package that will allow the United States to seize Russian oligarchs' assets and send money derived from them to Ukraine.
In the legislation of the $33 billion, I will be adding provisions that allow us to go after the oligarchs, take their money, and send it right to Ukraine. This is the kind of stuff we're talking about. Yachts, mansions.
Chairman Foreign Affairs Committee Gregory Meeks, who was at the same press conference, said all bets are off if the Russian president uses conventional weapons, including chemical weapons or strategical nukes.
If he does anything in regards to unconventional weapons, dealing with anything like chemical weapons, or any kind of strategical nukes, all bets are off. The speaker just said it. We're not going to back down to a bully. He's not going to be able to, sometimes bullies keep talking, but if they cross, he's going to know he's going to have to face the consequences. He needs to know that. So there's no backsliding or backing up. That's not going to divide us. It will only bring us closer together to make sure that we repudiate him and stop his aggression.
Meanwhile, a group of 40 civilians were evacuated from Mariupol's Azovstal steelworks in a convoy with vehicles bearing United Nations symbols, signaling a deal had been struck to ease the ordeal of the most destructive siege in the war. The group arrives at a temporary accommodation center afterwards. The Russian government said a total of 46 civilians left Azovstal and were provided with food and shelter. Satellite images collected by Maxar Technologies showed destruction around the besieged port city of Mariupol, much of it in ruins. Hundreds of fighters and some civilians are holed up in the Azovstal steelworks, their last holdout in Mariupol. Russian forces have been pummeling the factory after laying siege to Mariupol for weeks, but President Putin said the plant need not be stormed. On Friday, however, explosions were heard and smoke rose above the steelworks. In another development, Russia's defense ministry released footage on Sunday purporting to show a missile being fired that was used to carry out missile strikes on a runway at a military airfield near the city of Odessa a day earlier. The video showed what the Russian defense ministry said was a high-precision Onyx missile being fired from a launcher in an undisclosed location and moving off at speed to its target. The ministry says the missile strike on the military airfield destroyed a runway and a hangar containing weapons and ammunition supplied to Ukraine by the United States and European countries. Ukraine said Russian missiles knocked out a newly constructed runway at Odessa's main airport, but that it will be rebuilt. However, Odessa will never forget Russia's behavior towards it. Odessa's regional governor Maxim Marchenko said Russia used a Bastion missile launched in Crimea. The new runway, according to the city's mayor, had taken 10 years to design and build, and it was formally opened last July. During his visit to Kyiv on Thursday, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres called for a ceasefire and restoration of peace in Ukraine, following a meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky. He said the UN is expanding its humanitarian aid in various shapes to Ukraine, including cash, food and medical supplies, and expressed his appeals to end the conflict. He was still in Kyiv when Russia fired 2 long-range missiles at the capital on Thursday.
Over 440 people have died in the floods that ravaged South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal province. The floods have ravaged communities, displaced hundreds of people, and left government seeking billions of dollars for rehabilitation and reconstruction. Aid has been coming in through agencies from around the world. Our South Africa Bureau Chief Betty Dibia spoke to the resident coordinator of the UNDP in South Africa, Dr. Ayodele Odushola, about this.
We've seen what's been all over the news. We've been there. You've been quite vocal about the happenings in KwaZulu-Natal and some other provinces happening. Just your first reaction to the flood, the mudslides, and the aftermath.
Yeah, thank you very much, Betty. The flood we are currently experiencing in KwaZulu-Natal and Eastern Cape is quite devastating. Devastating in the sense that it has claimed over 450 people in terms of fatalities, and also it has destroyed infrastructure, damaged so many things, and truncated the basic service delivery such as water, health, sanitation, as well as electricity. It is really disturbing in terms of the causes of this. It really shows that climate change is real, and that the thinking of government about just transition should go beyond decarbonization into prioritizing and giving more attention to climate change adaptation strategy, so that we'll be able to ensure that our infrastructure is fully fortified to be resilient to climate change, and also our housing system is fully fortified, and we introduce a very strong planning system, and to ensure that our industries use what we call net zero carbon emission system. This is really very important for us to really be able to prevent this in the nearest future. But also, it's a clarion call to all our town planners in South Africa, because on no account should we have houses erected on waterways and floodplains. So this is something that is really very important for us to really address.
The conversation with Dr. Olushola continues after the break. Stay with us.
Your operatives, UN agency operatives, are on the ground working with non-profit organizations. What report has been received here? What are they telling you?
What they are telling us is that the situation is really bad in terms of the intensity of the disaster. It's really, really bad. And that's why we've started reprogramming. Now, because most of the programs we have for this year is not for issues of emergency. It's for issues of, supporting small-scale enterprises to grow. It's for issues of promoting early child education. It's for us to really promote water and sanitation in areas that they do not have. So meaning we want to reprogram. And that's why we have said now, because of the urgent things on the ground, the issue of capacity for coordination, we've mobilized close to about 6 million rand on that. And then we want to reprogram so that we meet these emergent needs. And those institutions that specialize in medium and long term are now allowed to focus on how to prevent this. So this is prevention. So we deal with humanitarian issues first, and then along that line, we deal with the issue of prevention mechanism so that we promote and advocate for climate adaptation.
Any timelines?
Well, issues of emergency like this, that when you talk about timelines, it depends. What is really urgent for us first is to deal with humanitarian issue. And first, we are organizing what you call an emergency capacity enhancement to support government on the ground. We are, for instance, waiting for the National Disaster Management Center to see what exactly do they need in terms of capacity on the ground. We are also working and expanding the possibility of working with Red Crescent Society, who are really the boots on the ground to see how we can make the gift of the givers are there too, to see how we can work with them instead of reinventing the wheel. What we need to do is to work with them to achieve these humanitarian needs.
I know the UN agencies here they've pledged support to the South African government and the people. What in particular will be done, to help?
Yeah, thank you. The United Nations system in South Africa comprises about 17 different agencies. We've met, we've had our emergency meetings, and we have discussed with our respective headquarters and the regional offices in terms of how do we support this emergency need. There are a number of things. The first one is the critical urgent things in terms of dignity kits. We usually call it dignity kits in terms of those that are homeless. How do we provide shelter for them in terms of blanket, in terms of soap, in terms of sanitary issues. So these are the kind of things that are considered to be extremely very urgent, and we are discussing with relevant institutions to make sure this is done. But what we are currently working on is psychosocial therapy that we are currently giving through our NGOs we are operating with on the ground. So we're working with that, and also just making use of faith-based organizations on the ground to see what we can do. As of some of the urgent things we have really rallied around that we want to use on the basis of the need we want to have from our partners in the province. We intend to really start with a bottom line of mobilizing things around 6 million rand to support those that are in need for now. But also it's part of the partnership we are having, especially UNDP is having with the National Disaster Management Center in terms of coordination. Because when you have things like this, coordination matters. And if it is not effectively handled, you can see a lot of things being put there with limited result. So we are focusing on coordination based on the partnership we're having with them. So we have also mobilized regional experts to deal with issues of emergency. They will be coming within the next 2 or 3 days. That's the kind of things we're discussing with our regional offices to make sure this one happens. And also we have discussed among the 17 UN agencies here, including the non-resident agencies, to reprogram the support we have for KwaZulu-Natal to focus on this particular emergency. So there are a number of things that are going on at the same time, and we want to make sure we do our best to do that. But essentially, There are a number of United Nations institutions that are meant for medium and long-term development institutions, like United Nations Development Program, like the United Nations Environment Program, and others. Now, what we want to do is to bring together how can we really make sure we build back better and stronger.
Given the topography of that area, KwaZulu-Natal, 1,000 hills, and the issue of land, you touched on spatial planning, for example, and how people hold on to any piece of land that they have. How much cooperation do you think, maybe your expert view here, how much cooperation do you think the people will give? Because we were in KwaZulu-Natal and people are already marking where they even lost their place and ensuring that they will be back to the places that they lost people and they lost property as well. Do you think this will be an easy thing to do in a country like this, given their history with land issues?
Yeah, thank you very much. This is something that is really very important. Land is key to development landscape in South Africa. And we know how, at the customary level, the attachment to land is very important. It's as if you are losing contact with your ancestors. So, but it's a development issue that will require consultation, advocacy, and dialogue. We'll continue to do that. We've done it in many countries of the world, and South Africa will not be an exception. It may be a very challenging thing, but I think it's really achievable. So what we need to do is to really see countries that have done it very well and how they've done it, and then look at the local context here, and then continue to engage them. But what is really very important is how can we ensure that these people are effectively compensated? Compensation matters. And when we do compensation with something that will be a kind of social compact between the people, the local government, the municipalities, the provincial government, and the national government. So it has to be the role play kind of social compact where there will be strong accountability. So I think that's one of the things. We've done it in many other parts of the world, including the Asian countries and even some part of Eastern Europe. And I strongly believe this is doable here. We can do it. It's a matter of really making sure that we do not really throw away inclusivity by making sure the people themselves are part of the solution. Because in African adage, you don't shave people's head in their absence. We need to really involve the people.
Yes. Finally, now going to the building back better. Your view, what should be the priority now for the government, of course, working with the people to get life back? It will be difficult, but one step at a time, as President Ramaphosa said, and together.
I strongly believe there is hardly anything we cannot do together. If you want to do it individually, it will be impossible. The government cannot do it alone. Even the communities cannot do it alone. The private sector cannot do it alone. So we need to really bring everybody together. And that's why we in the United Nations system believe in a whole of society approach, where the government plays its parts. When we talk about government, we talk about national, provincial, and municipalities. And also the communities need to play a very strong role. That's where we need our traditional institutions to know what the imperative of climate change is, what do we stand to gain if we make sure that we follow the need to replan. We need to make sure the individuals themselves are fully part of the process. And also our civil society organizations that are supposed to build the gap between communities and government need to play their role. And the international development agencies will have to, and we need to do that. But essentially, when we say areas are designated as floodplains or waterways, I think it needs to be effectively protected to ensure that no house whatsoever spring up in such locations. And the government needs to make sure that protection is well entrenched. And it's not only done by government, done by the government and the communities. But one thing is that because it's a long-term process, but what do we need to do to take care of the needs of the current situation? We need to really make sure that the resources, based on the past experience, when national government release some funds, it takes quite a long time to reach the beneficiary on the ground. So we have to make sure this process is fast-tracked, and the process of doing it is extremely efficient and effective. And we make sure that the idea of making sure we block all loopholes and leakages remain critical, because governance is key in everything. So I strongly believe it's doable, but we have to make sure that every stakeholder plays its own role effectively and efficiently.
This is where we end the program today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.